Oilers fans, the two best words in professional sports. Game 7.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and I want to thank everybody for making Locked On Oilers your first listen of the day. Got the Oilers covered every day. I am your host, Nick Zararis. I might not be your host much longer, depending on how tonight's game against the Vancouver Canucks goes, but real straightforward. First segment, we'll touch base on Game 6, some takeaways, some lessons, some ideas. I was originally going to do an episode Sunday, the day after the game, but I wanted to rewatch the game because Saturday, watching the game live, I was antsy, I was uncomfortable, I was very hopeful the Oilers were going to win, and ultimately they pulled away, but I felt like I needed a second watch to really kind of understand how that game got away from them. So we'll start there. Second segment, we're going to talk about some of the key decisions that worked for them there. And something else in that second segment. We're going to talk about the razor-thin margins of this series, how close it really has been, why we're at a Game 7. And then the third segment, we're going to talk about the magic of Game 7 in any context, what makes a Game 7 special, and why this one should live up to the hype, frankly. So, thinking about the game on Saturday and the way Game 5 had gone from an Oilers perspective, you didn't feel great. You felt that it was not good enough from where the Oilers were. And I think the hardest part as a fan that you're going to have to accept sometimes is that your best sometimes isn't good enough. And even if you don't have your best, there are ways to lose that are a little more satisfactory than the way the Oilers lost Game 5. Just being frank, when you lose in a certain way, when you lose that agonizingly close game on a goal with not a lot of time left, it's tough. And this Oilers team has shown quite a bit of resolve, quite a bit of mental toughness in these playoffs at large. And in this series, I as somebody eloquently pointed out in the comments of a video the other day, coming into this series, I had said the Canucks were just happy to be here. They weren't expected to be Stanley Cup contenders. They were down to a third-string goalie who had pretty much no NHL experience to speak of. And the Oilers have the weight of the world on their shoulders. They have a ticking time bomb in the general manager's office. Their two best players are going to be free agents in the next 24 to 36 months. There's a lot to unpack. There is a lot to consider as to why I felt the way I did. I genuinely felt that the Canucks were a nice story. You know, I have no ill will with the Canucks. I like quite a few players on that team. The news about Brock Besser and the blood clots, Brock's had a miserable year and a half, 2 years, can't stay healthy. His father passed away from Parkinson's. Just about as mentally taxing a 24 months you can have as a professional athlete. And in the midst of his best season of his career, injuries, just really unfortunate. But to that point about the Canucks, they had nothing left to prove. And I know that sounds stupid. You always want to try and win the Stanley Cup, but coming into the season, the Canucks were a trendy playoff team pick. Like, people thought they'd probably be one of the wild cards, maybe sneak into that third spot in the Pacific, depending on how the Flames and the Kraken shook out. Maybe there'd be room for the Canucks there, but nobody saw the Canucks as win the Pacific Division and make some noise in the playoffs. And the Canucks have enough talent that it's not a shock they've been this capable, even though some of their best players, like Elias Pettersson, haven't been great. Pettersson's had some flashes. He's made some nice plays. He's facilitated some goals, but he hasn't been the dominating force he was in the regular season. So with that in mind, and with the context of where both of these teams are in their respective trajectories, you'd probably say the Oilers are pretty close to the peak of their trajectory. Maybe there's a little bit more of incline going upwards towards a peak. Maybe if they win tonight, we can say, hey, they got to another tier. They're in the conference final again, first time in 2 years. They're going to be underdogs against Dallas if they win, but they're there, and anything can happen once you get there. Excuse me here. I got to take a sip of water. But with that in mind, the Oilers' ability to show some desperation is key. Now, Game 7 is a little bit different, and we're going to talk about that in the third segment of today's show. It's different in the type of desperation you're going to find during individual games of a series. I was questionable about going back to Stuart Skinner. I thought it ran the risk of setting the kid up for failure, which is something that the young, unproven goalie, and I know Skinner has more games played than she loves, and generally does profile as a starting goalie in the NHL. I mean, Stuart Skinner's had 2 solid regular seasons, but based on the way he has handled playoff adversity, it was a real question whether or not he would be able to meet the moment. And the Oilers' desperation in front of him put him in a position to succeed. To only have to make 14 saves, he had faced 15 shots on goal. He saved 14 of them. The Höglander goal he concedes, there's probably not a lot he can do there. Maybe he can get a piece of it, but it's probably going to beat him anyway. It worked. The Oilers came out and what could have been their last home game of the season, gave their fans, okay, we can do this. And that was my major takeaway from the game Saturday night was, if the chips are down, the Oilers have the ability to get desperate and find a way to make the game go the way they want it to. And not every team is able to find that level of desperation, especially from its star players. One thing that I've long felt is underrated in McDavid's bag, his skill set, and something that's really jumped out to me in this series is when he wants to be engaged as a forechecker, he's a menace with the stick lifts and using his body to create distance from the puck carrier and the puck. He's really good at manipulating his body to create space to win pucks or putting his stick in the right position to be able to win pucks. And he made some nice things happen. You don't win the game without your guys showing up. And he didn't get a goal, but he set up quite a few. That was my major takeaway. And something that happened also in Game 5, you got secondary scoring. You know, you got goals from Bouchard, you got goals from Nuge, you got Evander Kane, you got a Dylan Holloway. You get depth scoring. This Oilers team becomes a lot more dangerous. And yeah, Zach Hyman had a goal in there too. But Hyman's great, man. You know, 7 goals, 11 games. He's been really good these playoffs. And all of that does get thrown out the window, and we're going to talk about that in the third segment about what makes a Game 7 so exciting and so magical. But you saw the Oilers pounce on a disjointed Canucks team. The Canucks were not great on Saturday, and that helped immensely. You can only play who's in front of you. If the other team does you favors, you do have to take them up on those favors. And that was the key to that game. You know, Game 5, the Canucks had the puck a lot, but I didn't feel that they did a whole lot with it. And the Oilers went 0 for 5 on the power play in a game they lost by 1 goal. So all it takes is 1 power play goal, and then we're having a very different conversation about Game 5 and maybe Game 6. And I do think it, I'll save that. Actually, I was going to say something, but I'll save that point for the third segment because it has to do with Game 7 coming up. But one last thought on Saturday's game, just looking ahead, going ahead. You saw interesting lineup decisions. You know, no Corey Perry, no Henrique. You saw Sam Carrick get back in there, and the Oilers did a really nice job of making the Canucks play defense. You've heard me say that a lot over the last 2 weeks on this show. The key to defense in today's NHL is to play as little as possible of it, because it's harder than ever. You're not going to be able to sustain the requisite levels of energy to play effective defense 45 seconds, a minute and a half at a time, especially when you have defensemen who aren't great at breaking out. You know, that's one of the components of this series that I thought would ultimately decide it is whose defense held up better. And there hasn't been a lot of good defense on either side, in all honesty. I know I've seen more than one Canucks fan willing to drive Ian Cole to the airport. He has played really poor defensively for them in this series. But coming up next, we are going to talk about why this series has been so close, some of the key stats to point out just how close it's been. Coming up next on Locked On Oilers, where we've got your team covered every day. One of the most important responsibilities you have as a caregiver and a provider is life insurance. It's an important safety net for your family, but finding the right policy on your own can be time-consuming and overwhelming. Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. Policygenius helps you compare your options from all of the top companies, and a team of licensed experts is on hand to help talk you through it. Easily compare quotes from America's top insurers in just a few clicks to find the lowest price. Your work life insurance policy may not offer enough protection for your family's needs, or even worse, it may not come with you if you switch jobs. Check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com/lockedonnhl or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/lockedonnhl. Hello, and I want to thank everybody who's made Locked On Oilers a part of their Monday. I know Monday morning of a Game 7, you're probably not going to get a whole lot of work done, so I'm glad you've taken some time, some of your brain power to hang out here on Locked On Oilers, where it's been a real exciting playoffs. When you look around at the series as they went in the second round, when you look around these playoffs, the only series that made it to a Game 7, Vancouver and Edmonton, the one still going on. But Carolina and the Rangers very easily could have gone 7. Boston and Florida very easily could have gone 7. If Colorado wasn't as injured and Nichushkin wasn't suspended, I would probably have said that series would have gone 7 as well. But we're at a point where it's been very chalky, these playoffs, where the favorites have won, the division winners. You know, Florida won the Atlantic, Rangers won the Metro, Dallas won the Central. If the Canucks were to win, be the first time, and I want to say 20-something years, where the 4 division winners ended up being the final 4 teams in the playoffs. But this series has been very close. And I know game to game, it hasn't always been that close. You know, there are some weird numbers in there in these scores for this series. So I want to refine my point and say it in this way. These games have been close in score. The games that have been decided by 1 goal, especially the ones late or in overtime, the team that ultimately won was the one that was able to make something happen in a timely fashion. I know I had more than one person say, no, the Canucks totally outplayed them in Game 5. What are you talking about? Yes, the Canucks had the puck a lot more. They didn't do a whole lot with it. That game was 2-2 with a few minutes to go. Just because a team has the puck a lot more does not necessarily mean they are playing better. There is a correlation with possession, scoring chances, expected goals. But we should use the proper situational context to evaluate those numbers. And this is something that novices in the analytics community make the mistake of. You know, we've seen teams like Carolina, we've seen versions of the Flames, we've seen versions of the Devils, where they have the puck in the offensive zone a ton. They're throwing the puck on the net from every which way just to get heat on the goalie, try and force the defense to play defense. And philosophically, that makes sense. It's going to lead to more favorable outcomes, but it does leave you prone to the counterattack. It does leave you prone to a goalie getting hot because you're not making him work that hard. So that's the caveat there. So in this series, total goals, 21-18 in favor of Edmonton. The blowout in Game 6 kind of skewed the numbers in their favor, but those goals count, even if they're in a blowout, even if you're going to say stat padding. Of those 21 goals, 16 even strength, 5 power play, no shorthanded. Vancouver's 18, 15 even strength, 3 power play. So 16-15 at 5-on-5, 5-3 on special teams. That's close. And then you got to remember the fact the Oilers haven't scored on a power play in the last 2 games. The Canucks haven't scored on a power play in the last 3 games. So with that in mind, that tells you that these power plays are a little stressed. These penalty kills are feeling the confidence. They feel like they know what they need to do to put pressure on the other team's power play. And that's ultimately the best mentality to have for a penalty kill. You want to put pressure on the other team. And I know there are several teams in the NHL that still employ more of a passive penalty kill structure that's more oriented around compressing around the goalie, trying to block shots and break up passing lanes, and inviting people to shoot from the circles or the point because the goalie can see it coming in, or the penalty killers can compress, turn, block shots. And sure, possession is good, but you got to do something with it. And there have been stretches in this series where the Canucks have just had the puck a lot, but the Oilers have done a reasonable enough job defensively that they haven't gotten killed. Yes, you would always prefer to be on offense than defense. That's not feasible. So your goal as a defense should be to play as little defense as possible, transition from defense to offense quickly, and capitalize on your opportunities when you can, especially when you're a team like the Oilers that's good at creating off of the rush. You think about the Dylan Holloway goal on Saturday night where he goes coast to coast. That's an example of what you can manufacture as an offense, as a rush team against the team that has the puck a lot. It is okay to get outshot. It is okay to get out expected goals. It is okay to get out high danger chance. The value of those statistics is that more likely than not, you will get a positive outcome the better you do in them. It is not a guarantee. It is not a lock. The only guarantee is if you score more goals than the other team. Sure, it is easier to score more dangerous shots because they're closer to the net, but that does not necessarily mean they will go in. Sometimes the other goalie is just better. And in this series, that's really been the difference in these games. In the games where the Oilers have gotten reasonable goaltending, they've won. In the games they've lost, they haven't. The save percentages in this series for both teams are disgusting. For the Oilers, it's .864, which is just unacceptable. If the Oilers had .890 save percentage, they would have been through to the next round probably after Game 5, maybe Game 6 if we're going to be generous. That's how bad Stuart Skinner's been at points in this series. Shelov's .879 really got dinged up. That number really looks a lot worse now because he conceded so many goals on so few shots on Saturday. But those numbers count. Sure, you could say he probably had an off day. Most Canucks fans are probably going to argue it was just a bad game. It was bad situationally. The Oilers were able to make some things happen, and we got our doors blown off. And there are a lot of Canucks fans who have accepted they did not play well enough on Saturday, and then the Oilers blew their doors off. It happens. The playoffs are long. You can get too high, you can get too low, and that does impact things. I think the Oilers have found a reasonable middle ground that they're not in, that no matter how badly they play the game before or how well they play the game before, they're not totally out of the mix. So the last thought I'll leave you with about how close this series has been. We're going to a Game 7. The goal differential is 21-18, 16-15 at even strength. More likely than not, the goal that wins this series is going to come on even strength. Games are 75 to 85% played at even strength, depending on the night. It's a Game 7. The entire world's going to be watching because this is the only hockey game. There's no basketball on tomorrow night either. This will be a prison rules hockey game, if I had to guess. The NHL is not going to want to even have the slightest appearance of officials having an outsized influence on the game. Speaking of officials having an outsized influence on the game, I'm sorry, that goal shouldn't have been disallowed on Saturday. McDavid got bumped into Shelov's, and Shelov's went down like he was shot. That was ridiculous. I'm sorry, man. I understand as a goalie, you're a little more fragile, but he went down like McDavid threw his shoulder square into his chest. That's patently ridiculous. And McDavid got pushed in. So much for the Oilers getting all of the calls. Ridiculous nonsense. I enjoy a lot of people who write about the Canucks and who are Canucks fans at their social media presence. But God, are they annoying when it comes to the officials. The officials are bad. They are not against your team. They are just bad. Okay, off my soapbox. Coming up next on Locked On Oilers, we're going to talk about Game 7s, why they're so fun, and why they're so stressful. Coming up next. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicles and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Want to thank all of the everydayers, the people who listen to Locked On Oilers every day, the backbone of the show, the foundation of the show, the intangibles, the bottom six guys who might not be the flashiest, but they are invaluable. Thank you to everyone who makes this show a part of their day, no matter what time of day, whether you're first thing in the morning on the way to work or on the way to school, in the afternoon on the way home, at the gym, on a walk, whatever your consumption habits. Thank you so much for making Locked On Oilers and me a part of your day for the last few weeks. It's been a lot of fun. I love the opportunity to get to understand the game more. That's my biggest goal, and pretty much all of the content I do, regardless of sport. I do stuff in football media. I do some stuff in baseball media as well, on top of hockey content here at Locked On, some of my own projects. But I always want to know more. And this opportunity to immerse myself in the Oilers has given me a greater appreciation for Connor McDavid, for Draisaitl, for Bouchard, for Ekholm, for Chris Knobloch. This team has been really interesting to get to understand, because watching a team from the outside looking in, where you only watch them sparingly, to watching every game, especially in the playoffs, it tells you a lot about what a coach thinks about his players and based on how he uses them, the matchups he tries to get them, and how players react to certain situations. I've really enjoyed this, and I hope that the Oilers find a way to make this keep going, because I think they're definitely going to have a puncher's chance against the Stars. They would need to be better, but we'll cross that bridge should we come to it. So, Game 7, two best words in all of professional sports. No matter the stakes, if it's the first round, if it's the championship round, this is why you do this as a player, as a fan. The raw emotion that goes into this type of situation is something you can't replicate in other walks of life. That's what makes sports special. Sure, you can watch a really good movie and it gets to the denouement, the resolution where the hero or the villain does whatever, and that develops the plot in one direction or another, the big reveal, if you will. Sports are not fake. To quote the great Spike Lee, who, like me, very sad about the Knicks losing, but before Game 7 of the 2004 ALCS between the Red Sox and the Yankees, Spike Lee was doing a hit for ESPN where he was on the field, he was talking to Dan Patrick, who still worked for ESPN at the time, and Dan Patrick goes, "Spike, could you write something like this? The Red Sox coming back from 3-0 to force a Game 7 against the Yankees, to play at Yankee Stadium in a Game 7 with a chance to go to the World Series." And Spike Lee very emphatically said, no, I couldn't. Sports are real, and that's why they're the best. Movies, TV, all that stuff, it's fake. Someone had to come up with that. This is real life. This is not reality TV. This is the actual reality TV. You know, reality TV is scripted. It encourages the worst of behaviors to get attention. Sports are the real reality TV. You see how people handle their emotions, their feelings in these hyper intensive environments where the slightest mistake and you are blasphemed for eternity. There are more than enough guys I can think of across a variety of sports who have failed to meet the moment, who have always been villainized for their roles in a team's failures. And someone is going to enter Oilers lore for better or for worse tonight. Whether that's Stuart Skinner making one of the more miraculous in-series comebacks and having a genuinely quality performance that buoys them along. If Connor McDavid just goes full Goku and says, we're not losing this game, get on my back, and drops 5 points. If Leon decides I'm putting another hat trick on the board and the 3 Oiler fans who can afford to get in BC throw their hats on the ice, he'll smile, he'll chew on his mouth guard, he'll take one of the hats home with him. But when it comes to picking a Game 7, I think we have to separate a Game 7 from the rest of a series. I think Games 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, that's one movie. Game 7 is the sequel. And I've workshopped this theory for a long time because, yes, everything that happened up to that point does matter to some degree. The coaches are using it as part of informing their decision-making. The players are using it to inform some of their decision-making. But it is an entirely standalone entity. Everything that has happened before this does not matter in the context of this game and how it's going to be played. Sure, maybe Stuart Skinner is not going to play well. Maybe Shelovs is not going to play well. Maybe McDavid's not going to play well. We don't know until they play the game. Anybody who's making bold proclamations is just trying to get attention, I promise. I think the Oilers' advantage in a one-game elimination environment is that their high-end players are 2 of the 7 or 8 best players in the entire world. That's the argument if you think the Oilers are going to win this game. That Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl are going to just impose their will on this game and not give the Canucks the chance. If you think the Oilers are going to win, it's probably going to come down to their star players. You heard me say their power play hasn't scored in 2 straight games. The Oilers all-time are 7-4 in Game 7s. Their most recent, 2022, against the Kings. They won that one 2-0. Prior to that, Game 7, 2017, the first time they made the playoffs with McDavid, they lost to the Ducks 2-1. Before that, on their road, before that was Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final. The Oilers have not played a lot of Game 7s in their recent history. Most of their other Game 7s are pre-1990. They're the Gretzky era, so not a lot of recent history there. And likewise for the Canucks, their last Game 7 prior to the one in the bubble in 2020 where they lost to Vancouver was Game 7 of the Cup Final to the Bruins, and that was 2011. These are 2 teams that do not get to this point that often, and the Oilers' stakes are a lot more real. I think the Oilers are going to win this game. I want the Oilers to win this game. Will they win this game? That's going to come down to their stars. I have been very deferential to McDavid and Draisaitl. I know the counting stats aren't as insane as they've typically been, especially in McDavid's case. He hasn't scored a goal in a while, but there is no person on this planet I would take in a do-or-die hockey game before Connor McDavid. That's your argument if you're an Oilers fan and you need to talk yourself into feeling okay about this. Game 7 anxiety is real. You will walk around your room, you will walk around your office, you will walk around your block just trying to idly kill time so you're not sitting there thinking about, oh God, what if they lose? I think the Oilers are going to win this hockey game. I desperately would like them to win this hockey game. I think we see one of those performances that gets somebody's legacy cemented in the annals of Oilers history tonight. I really feel that this Oilers team has to recognize the moment and the associated desperation that comes with trying to meet this moment. The Oilers have done a good job of coming out with desperation after losing in the playoffs. They need to find a way to win 2 straight games and win this series because the stakes are a lot higher for them than it is for the Canucks. The Canucks are having a nice season. If they get to the conference final, they can certainly win a game or 2 against the Stars. Their Stars are a little dinged up. Jake Ottinger is not infallible. I think the Canucks are still maybe at the halfway point of their upward trajectory. I feel like the Canucks definitely have more room in their window. I think that the Oilers clock is ticking a lot faster. Connor McDavid's biological clock is ticking. I think the Oilers are going to win tonight. I desperately hope they win tonight for his sake, for Leon's sake, for Bouchard's sake, for Stuart Skinner's sake, and even for Chris Knobloch's sake. That will do it for today's edition of Locked On Oilers. Make sure you are subscribed wherever you get your podcasts or over on YouTube. Let me know. Do you think the Oilers are going to win? I will talk to you as soon as Game 7 is over for instant reaction and what you need to know going into your Tuesday.